Here is the complete cinematic story, written as one continuous story with an emotional arc and satisfying ending. The moment Grant Holloway opened the wrong door, he saw something his wealthy CEO neighbor would have paid millions to keep hidden. A woman who commanded boardrooms, terrified competitors, and appeared on magazine covers was sitting alone on the floor of her spotless kitchen, clutching an old photograph to her chest while tears streamed silently down her face. But what shocked Grant most was not seeing her cry. It was hearing the woman who seemed to have everything whisper to an empty room, "Please, just give me one more chance." Grant froze with his hand still on the doorknob, realizing he had accidentally walked into the one room in the world where he was never supposed to be. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so our community can keep sharing stories that remind us there is always more beneath the surface. Grant had moved into the quiet townhouse complex only 3 weeks earlier, carrying 2 suitcases, a toolbox, and the exhaustion of a man who had learned how to survive without asking anyone for help. He was 38, a single father to a 9-year-old daughter named Elsie, and worked as a maintenance technician for a property management company. His clothes were always clean but worn, his shoes had been repaired twice, and his old blue pickup truck made a strange rattling sound whenever he turned left. Yet Grant never complained about any of it. Every morning, he packed Elsie's lunch, checked her homework, tied her shoelaces when she was too sleepy to do it herself, and drove her to school before heading to work. His wife, Maribel, had died several years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving Grant with a child who still sometimes woke up expecting to hear her mother's voice. Since then, Grant had quietly built their life around one promise: Elsie would never believe that losing someone meant losing love. Across the small courtyard lived Vivian Mercer, the 41-year-old CEO of Mercer Biotech, a company valued at nearly $2 billion. She was known for being brilliant, demanding, private, and almost impossible to approach. People in the neighborhood whispered about her expensive cars, her security system, her designer clothes, and the fact that she rarely attended social gatherings. Grant had seen her only a handful of times. She would walk quickly from her car to her front door, usually carrying a laptop bag, her expression unreadable. Grant never judged her. He had learned long ago that a person could be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. That morning, Grant was carrying a small box of donated books toward the community children's room when he noticed water dripping from the ceiling of the hallway outside Vivian's townhouse. He immediately set down the box and called the management office. The maintenance supervisor told him the leak appeared to be coming from the neighboring unit and asked Grant to check the doors to make sure the water had not spread. Grant had been given access to several empty maintenance keys during his workday, and because the labels on 2 nearly identical keys had rubbed off, he grabbed the wrong one without realizing it. He inserted the key, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. Then he saw her. Vivian was sitting on the kitchen floor, barefoot, still wearing the elegant cream-colored suit she had apparently worn to a morning business meeting. Her expensive handbag lay overturned beside her. Papers were scattered across the floor, but she wasn't looking at them. She was staring at an old photograph of a little boy standing beside a woman in a hospital gown. Her shoulders trembled as she held the picture against her chest. Grant's heart tightened because he recognized that expression immediately. It was the expression of someone who had been holding pain inside for so long that eventually there was nowhere left to hide it. Vivian looked up and saw him. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the powerful CEO who could negotiate billion-dollar contracts looked suddenly frightened. She scrambled to her feet, wiped her face, and instinctively stepped in front of the photograph as though Grant had caught her committing a crime. Her voice was barely audible when she said that he had entered the wrong home and needed to forget what he had seen. Grant immediately stepped backward and apologized, explaining that he had been checking the leak and had grabbed the wrong key. But before he could leave, he noticed something written on the photograph's back. It was a date from 12 years earlier. Grant didn't ask questions. He simply closed the door and walked away. By lunchtime, he he had almost convinced himself to forget everything. But while repairing a broken railing near the courtyard, he saw Vivian standing alone beside her car, staring at the photograph. She looked composed again, almost cold. Yet Grant noticed the way her fingers were trembling. He understood that she wasn't afraid of him telling people she cried. She was afraid someone would discover the story behind those tears. That afternoon, Elsie came home from school holding a drawing. It showed a little girl standing beside a woman and a man under a bright yellow sun. Grant smiled and asked why she had drawn 3 people when there were only 2 of them. Elsie answered that her teacher had asked the children to draw what they hoped their families would look like one day. Grant's smile faded for a second, but he hugged her and told her that families did not always have to look the same to be complete. Elsie then asked why the sad lady across the courtyard always looked lonely. Grant was surprised. He asked how she knew. Elsie explained that she had seen Vivian sitting on the bench during lunch breaks, staring at other children playing with their parents. Grant told her that sometimes grown-ups carried heavy things too, and Elsie innocently replied that maybe someone should help her carry them. The next morning, Grant found a small envelope beneath his door. Inside was a note from Vivian thanking him for respecting her privacy. There was also a generous amount of money. Grant stared at it for a long time before returning it. He left a short note explaining that he had not helped her by keeping quiet, he had simply done what he hoped someone would do for him if they ever saw him at his weakest. When Vivian read those words, something inside her shifted. A few days later, she approached Grant while he was fixing a broken sprinkler. She tried to thank him again, but Grant told her she didn't owe him anything. Vivian looked uncomfortable with kindness that didn't come with a price. Eventually, she revealed that the little boy in the photograph was her younger brother, Caleb. 12 years earlier, Caleb had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. Vivian had been 29, ambitious, and already rising rapidly in the corporate world. Their father had been struggling financially, and Vivian believed she could solve everything with money and influence. She worked constantly, convinced that every successful deal brought her closer to paying for the treatment Caleb needed. But Caleb didn't need money from his sister. He needed her presence. On the day of his most dangerous procedure, Vivian had been across the country closing the biggest deal of her career. She had promised Caleb she would return before the surgery. She didn't make it in time. Caleb died before she reached the hospital. Her career exploded afterward, and the world praised her for becoming one of the youngest CEOs in her industry. But privately, she had never forgiven herself. Grant listened without interrupting. Vivian admitted that the photograph was the last picture she had taken with Caleb. She had hidden it because looking at it hurt, but hiding it hurt even more. She had built her entire life around the belief that if she became successful enough, she could somehow prove that Caleb's death had not been meaningless. Grant quietly told her that perhaps she had spent 12 years trying to punish herself for being human. Those words broke something open. Vivian began crying again, but this time she did not hide her face. Grant didn't tell her everything would be fine. He knew better than to offer empty promises. Instead, he told her that grief did not disappear simply because someone became successful. Sometimes grief needed to be carried differently. Sometimes forgiveness was not something another person gave you. Sometimes it was the permission you finally gave yourself to keep living. Their friendship grew slowly. Grant never treated Vivian like a billionaire, and Vivian began discovering how refreshing it was to be around someone who didn't want anything from her. She started helping Elsie with a school science project, initially awkwardly, then with genuine enthusiasm. Grant watched in surprise as the intimidating CEO sat at the kitchen table explaining simple chemistry experiments while Elsie laughed so hard she nearly spilled juice on the papers. For the first time in years, Vivian laughed too. But then everything changed. Grant's employer announced that several maintenance positions would be eliminated after a major contract was cancelled. Grant was one of the workers scheduled to lose his job. He didn't tell Vivian. He simply began taking extra weekend shifts and applying elsewhere while worrying about how he would keep paying rent, Elsie's school expenses, and the medical bills he still carried from years earlier. Vivian eventually discovered the truth through a coincidence. Instead of offering Grant a job, she quietly contacted the property company and offered to fund a community maintenance program that would keep several workers employed. Grant was furious when he found out. He told her he didn't need charity. Vivian replied that she wasn't giving him charity. She was investing in people who deserved the chance to keep standing. Grant realized she was not trying to rescue him. She was trying to become the person she wished she had been for Caleb. But the biggest test was still coming. A few weeks later, Mercer Biotech became involved in a major legal dispute after a senior executive was accused of hiding safety concerns connected to one of the company's products. The board demanded that Vivian resign temporarily while an investigation took place. Newspapers portrayed her as ruthless and careless. Investors turned against her. People who had spent years praising her suddenly acted as if they had never known her. Vivian returned home devastated. This time, when Grant found her sitting at her kitchen table, she wasn't hiding. She told him she wanted to resign permanently because perhaps everyone was right. Maybe she had spent her whole life chasing achievement because she didn't know how to live with herself. Grant reminded her that making mistakes did not make someone beyond redemption. But he also told her something harder: if she truly believed the company had failed people, walking away would be easier than staying and fixing it. Vivian looked at him for a long time. The next morning, she returned to work. She cooperated fully with the investigation, released internal documents, accepted responsibility for the failures that had happened under her leadership, and demanded reforms that cost the company millions. Some executives abandoned her. Some investors sold their shares. But employees began speaking publicly about the changes. Slowly, the truth became clearer: Vivian had not created every problem, but she had spent years building a culture where results mattered more than people. For the first time, she admitted that openly. The board eventually voted to keep her as CEO, but Vivian changed. She no longer measured every day by profits. She created a medical assistance foundation in Caleb's name, funding treatment for families who could not afford specialized care. She also established paid family leave throughout her company, explaining that no employee should ever have to choose between being present for someone they loved and keeping their job. Grant watched all of it from the courtyard. One afternoon, Vivian handed him the old photograph. Grant was surprised and asked why she was giving it to him. She smiled through tears and explained that she had spent 12 years believing the photograph belonged to her guilt. Now she understood that it belonged to her memories. Caleb had not only been the boy she lost. He had been the brother who made her laugh, annoyed her, challenged her, and loved her. She wanted to remember all of him, not just the day he died. She told Grant that opening the wrong door had been the strangest accident of her life, but perhaps it had opened the right door after all. Grant smiled and told her that sometimes the wrong door leads you exactly where you were supposed to go. Months passed, and the courtyard changed. Children played there after school. Neighbors began gathering for weekend lunches. Vivian no longer rushed from her car to her front door. She stopped to talk to people. Grant eventually found a better maintenance position through a community program funded by Vivian's foundation, but he never accepted special treatment. He earned his place, just as he always had. One bright afternoon, Elsie ran across the courtyard carrying a framed photograph. It was a new picture of Grant, Elsie, and Vivian standing together beneath the same yellow sun Elsie had drawn months earlier. Vivian looked at it and became emotional. Elsie smiled and told her that she had changed her old drawing. There were now 4 people in it. Grant asked who the 4th person was. Elsie pointed to the sky. She had drawn Caleb there. Vivian covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Grant placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and for once, she didn't try to hide her tears. She simply let them fall. Because that was the day Vivian finally understood that healing did not mean forgetting the people you lost. It meant allowing their love to become part of the life you continued to live. And Grant learned something too. Sometimes being a good person does not mean fixing someone's life. Sometimes it means seeing their brokenness, refusing to judge them for it, and staying long enough for them to remember that they are still worth saving. Before the ending, tell us honestly, have you ever met someone who looked strong on the outside but was quietly fighting a battle no one knew about? Leave a meaningful comment and share what this story taught you about forgiveness, kindness, or second chances. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And as the afternoon sunlight stretched across the courtyard, Grant watched Elsie laugh beside Vivian, while the old photograph rested safely in its new frame. No one talked about the wrong door anymore. Because sometimes the door we accidentally open reveals the pain someone has spent years hiding. And sometimes, if we respond with compassion instead of judgment, that same door becomes the beginning of a completely new life.